Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Well, nice to have you here on the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Have you seen a copy of our magazine yet? So the first and second issues are out and the third is coming out soon. The third issue is focused on healthcare. The first one was on workplace and the second one was on home. So each issue has a different theme. You can buy it on our website or on Amazon. And thanks to everybody who's bought so far and supported us. Really appreciate that. We've got a really exciting interviewee today. Her name is Paula Rowntree. She's head of workplace design at LLOYDS Banking Group. She's responsible for branch design for Halifax, Bank of Scotland, and Lloyds Bank. So she's got her work cut out for her. And she's also speaking at the Workspace design show, which is taking place on the 27th and the 28th of February 2023. It's being held at the Business Design Centre in London, and I'm going to put a link in the blurb that goes with the podcast so you can just click through there. But if you're listening to it and you want to go and find it, it's workspaceshow.co.uk. But first of all, Paula, many thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
That's great. Well, can you tell us about yourself? What got you into design? What was your journey? What kick-started it?
Oh gosh, so I worked for LLOYDS Banking Group now for 34 years. Clearly I started when I was about 10, but I actually started in the branch. So I worked most of the different roles in the branch, and then kind of went into some of the central teams, ended up in marketing, sort of, the branding side of things, and started looking after sort of the brand side of kind of branch design. And then about 8 years or so ago, I transitioned across to kind of the core team and took on responsibility for looking after the branch design for our three retail brands. So, as you say, Halifax, Bank of Scotland and Lloyds Bank. And that's been a bit of an evolution over the last sort of few years, about 6 months now. I've just expanded my role into office design. So just looking at how we design our offices for the future as we learn more about working methods and things post-pandemic. So as people start to, having spent 2 years at home, what is the role of office as people sort of come back in, or do they come back in? And if so, what kind of things do they need to do in the office? So that makes life very interesting. Never without a dull moment.
Super busy. Do you enjoy it? Is it kind of like an enjoyable job? Does it have its stressful moments, or are you kind of like?
Yeah, I love it. Honestly. I get up every day and feel very proud to sort of do this job. I personally think it's the best job in the bank, but I would. But when I talk to people in the bank, they're like, "Oh gosh, I didn't know people did that." And of course somebody has to do that, think about the design. So it's a bit more of an unusual sort of job when I'm describing it at the hairdressers or whatever, like, "Oh gosh, yeah." So it's always a talking point. But yeah, I get a lot of joy and sort of happiness, I think, about doing sort of creating great design, because it's all about human beings and being able to kind of see what something looked like before and then seeing what it looks like after, and actually seeing the people enjoy the space is brilliant. I think it's partly the marketeer that's still in me. I used to get a lot of buzz about making a TV ad or a big outdoor poster and things, but it's over and you spend an awful lot of time, and then it's like 2 weeks and that poster's gone, or a couple of months and that TV ad's down. I think with spaces, you're creating something that's going to probably be there for years. So, and every time you go back to one that you did, it's like a child that you sort of gave birth to in some ways, because you went through all that design process. And then I love it.
Yeah, you can tell it's addictive as well. Yes, brilliant. So yeah, you mentioned the sort of human factor there. You kind of mentioned that when you go back and you kind of see how people kind of really enjoying the space, and you obviously get a kick out of that. Why is it important, do you think, that we create better workspaces? Well, what's the sort of like one of the key things that really is important?
Yeah, I think for me, it probably, if you'd asked me this question a couple of years ago, I might have had a completely different answer. But I think having gone through sort of 2 years of, or 2.5 years of sort of isolation and being away from people, and you know, all the mental health and sort of, you know, difficulties that was. I mean, I was lucky, we're a family of 5, so we still had a human contact and interactions going on, but you know, for a lot of people that's so isolating. And I think it really kind of brought home how important it is to connect with other people. You know, it's like the oxygen that we need to breathe, really, and the food and the you know, the sort of water. I think it's a fundamental sort of thing that as humans we need that interaction, and I don't think we realized how much we need it, because we'd always had it, until it was sort of taken away. I think it's only when something's taken away from that you realize, actually, gosh, this was actually really important to me, and I'm having to kind of recalibrate, you know, what this actually means. So so I think for me, the importance of the office space is it's about that human connection, and it's about being with other people. You know, it's those corridor moments, or those just that sort of saying hello to other people, and you know, sort of, yeah, just bouncing ideas off of people, and being creative, or just having a conversation, and also seeing when somebody's maybe not okay. You know, it's a lot easier if you see somebody in a space to know that, you know, they're not quite their self, whereas with their head behind a screen, or if they're at home and you can't see them, then you can't always pick up on those signs. So yeah, I think it's incredibly sort of important, the workplace, just as a sort of, you know, it's a well-being, yeah, it's a well-being reason, I think, ultimately, and we've proven we can do jobs at home. We did it for 2 years, but that doesn't necessarily mean we should, or we have to, with everything, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And of course you're going to be speaking at the Workspace Design Show coming up on between the 27th and the 28th of February 2023 at the Business Design Centre in London. I'm going to put a link in the spiel for people who are listening, but it's the workspaceshow.co.uk. Yeah, so we're really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say about that there as well. How do you think biophilic design helps? I mean, obviously, how long have you known about biophilic design, and is it sort of is it you know, you're implementing it in your workplace? You know, how do you think it helps well-being?
Yeah, I think we started looking at biophilic design probably about 4 years ago now,
Yeah.
And I think it's incredibly important, actually. So you know, I mean, I said to my husband this morning, I was having this podcast, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, it's biophilic design." He went, "What?" I was like, "Oh, right, okay." So I think that sort of description and that sort of terminology, but that it's that deep-rooted connection to nature that I think we all have, and you know, people sort of, you know, when they're going through a moment, I mean, how many times do you go outside and and just breathe, you know, and breathe the fresh air, or, you know, just look at a great scenery, or that emotion that you get from, you know, just being more connected in with nature. And I think for a long time, our sort of, you know, our spaces almost, you know, I don't know whether it was just that sort of design trends or what, but we almost took nature out of buildings, and you know, made them sort of quite corporate, and maybe perhaps a little more sterile. And I think just more recently, I think that trend has started to push, you know, move back around. And I, for one, think it's a good thing. I think that connection to nature, and when I go into spaces that have greenery, or sort of, you know, more of a wood, you know, a wood sort of feel to it, timbers or whatever, I think you calm and you relax very, very quickly in the space. Whereas, you know, I think without that, yeah, you can still have a great design, but it sometimes feels a little bit more corporate, a little bit more austere. And I think, you know, planting and biophilia just softens. It softens an environment. It makes it feel warmer. As I say, makes people feel more relaxed within that environment. And yeah, they just feel better. You know, there's just something about planting and things that just, yeah, they just naturally make you feel better, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it's also about colorways, isn't it, as well? You know, you kind of, you know, how you choose to change your color palette, you know, so you can have something that's quite earthy, or sea, or, you know, blue mind even type things, you know, but yeah, kind of bringing in the browns and stuff too. Yeah.
I was doing I did a freelance project with COVID, actually, for my cousin, because he was looking at his office sort of space, and it kept me saying, because I spent 2 years just developing perspex and dots, for spaces, which was not the most engaging. But for him, I kind of worked on his design element, and his brand at the time was this sort of hot pink. And I think had a little bit of orange and everything. It was like, gosh, what can we do? And we were sort of looking at biophilia planters within the space, and I was sort of googling, and I was like, what about birds of paradise? That birds of paradise sort of florals. So we had all the greenery, and then this pop of color coming through, and it was amazing. And we just sort of wove them in and amongst the spaces, and it was just such a subtle, I mean, yes, we could have done great big sort of graphic treatments and things like that, but actually getting across that pop of color within a more natural environment, but using those sort of strong colors from that sort of more tropical sort of element, it just worked beautifully. And yeah, his team loved it, so it was good. It was a lot of fun.
Fantastic. We've got a photograph of that. I can put that on the website along with the post. So yeah, ping that one over.
I dig one out. Yeah.
So I mean, how do you think we, just generally, can companies incorporate biophilic design into the workplaces? How can we sort of design better using it, really, in our thinking as well?
Yeah, I think there's layers within sort of biophilic design, and I think as a business you've got to kind of work out what is it you're trying to do. First of all, what's the kind of buildings that you've actually got? I think there's degrees of biophilia, having sort of looked at it. So you've got everything from I'm just going to say plastic planting, which is sort of there. It looks green, and you're sort of trying to see whether is it real or is it not real. There's that sort of side of things. There's preserved planting, so planting that was real, but isn't really, but it's sort of there. And again, that is probably simpler to deploy, and it gives the illusion of sort of planting within the environment, and can sort of help with that sort of environment and atmosphere and things like that. But I think the true biophilia is where you're into water filtration systems, and being able to do more planting, whether it's pot plants or trees or living walls or anything like that. That comes with a cost, so it's a cost to install, but it's also a cost to sort of maintain. So for some companies, it's depends where they are and who they're run by. But do you have to create a business case for this, and how do you do that? That's challenging, because it's not cheap to do that sort of filtration system sort of piece. So it's trying to work, I think, with the building. I mean, ultimately, if you have the opportunity to design the whole of the building and kind of work it in, then for me it would be integrating that. So everything from sort of lower level planting, which can be the pot plants with you can get sort of good nice beautiful planting at that sort of lower level. I'm a big lover of the greenery on ceilings, sort of hanging plants that sort of drop down. I think they're stunning, and just look amazing. I think the living walls are interesting. I think they can be beautiful, but they can also, if you don't have a good water filtration system, they you get patches that are sort of getting a bit brown and wizened and things like that. And whilst I think they look dramatic, I'm kind of on the fence at the moment as to we've experimented with one, and I'm kind of learning as part of that. But yeah, but I mean, it's all different degrees of sort of planting in various different ways that you can do it.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, with those living walls, I interviewed quite a few different living wall people, and just through my network and that, you just chat to people and they've got different systems. I mean, there's like all sort of digital stuff, and there's an app that tells you when it's going dry. Skogluft have got that. They're just introducing that into the UK. They've been all around Europe and stuff, and they've just been working with the university, I think in Italy, to devise something to make it like you know, easy, so that nobody screws up on it, basically. But it's a guy called Daniel Bell, who does eco-friendly living walls, and he's got like juniper trees and stuff like that, and it's really, really low maintenance, but it's made out of it, so it's quite an interesting sort of story in terms of sustainability as well, in sort of terms of branding and PR and whatnot. But it's literally, it's a podcast I've done with him, so people who are listening as well can Google Daniel Bell. He uses recycled clothing basically, and he just staples it, and there's like no soil, and it's just on a rack basically that's like hung, and it's like you can get something really dramatic, and obviously you can sort of, you know, colorway it and brand it and whatever else with it, but it's just yeah, it's pretty cool, because he goes beyond the, you know, baby tears and all that sort of stuff. He puts those in, but then he's about textures, and so, you know, you can get creative with him and do whatever. But anyway, I'll send the link. I'm always yeah, I always feature his work in the journal, actually, because it's just so stunning and beautiful, and just sort of flamboyant, and but simple and sustainable, which is just cool. So anyway, I'm always banging on about him. So poor old Daniel's like, his ears must be all the blinking time. So yeah, have you, obviously, I know you just mentioned the birds of paradise, to bring that pop of branded color. I mean, which I, you know, my background's also marketing, PR, branding and stuff, in a branding agency. So I'm always like, yeah, that's really cool. I'm like, that's such a great idea. I want more people doing that, kind of thinking out the box like that. So I can imagine what that must look like. For yourself, like in the current role that you've got, maybe one of the banks or something, have you you know, sort of used Biophilic Design? Maybe you could just sort of tell us a little bit about maybe what it was like before, and then kind of what you know, what the challenges were maybe, and what you did, and maybe the differences.
Yeah, one of the things, this is why sort of a few years ago we were how we got into into sort of biophilia. So I think from Lloyds Bank, we've got sort of quite a strong sustainability agenda. So we've got all sorts of pledges and commitments that we're sort of making. So, you know, I kind of wanted to think about, well, what could I do from a physical branch design perspective? And we had a branch coming up that we were sort of about to refit. It suffered a lot of water damage. In fact, it had a fire, and then it had water damage. So on Oxford Street. So we wanted to kind of create something special. It's just up opposite sort of Bond Street station. So very, very central sort of location. Big branch. We had a reasonable budget to be able to kind of to redo that. So we kind of said, right, okay, if we were going to do a sustainable branch, that was the sort of brief that I gave to the team, and how we sort of thought about it was, if we're going to really push the boundaries about sustainability, what could we do within you know, the physical sort of branch design? So you know, we changed all the HVAC changed all the heating systems to HVAC, and we've got, I think it's a ground source heating pump in there, and we did LED lighting. So we kind of really did all that, but then we also wanted to think about sort of biophilia, and we did some real cool things about furniture as well. So we were connected up with a company called Chimera, who they take sort of plastic waste out of the ocean, and they create fabrics with it. So we were doing, you know, chairs fabric, and we found some really cool tables that were old army uniforms. The green ones and the blue ones were old bank uniforms, which we thought was quite cool. So we kind of were really looking at we really sort of explored like little companies that were sort of being very innovative in that sort of sustainability mode. And then of course planting. So you can't really do a physical space when you're looking at sort of sustainability without thinking about planting. So that's when we started to sort of explore you know, what could we do, and we kind of wanted to experiment with all elements of it. So within there, I've got some high raft sort of you know, moss kind of walls, not walls, they're sort of discs that are sort of coming down. We've got preserved planting up at the ceiling level, partly because we'd already had a flood in there. So getting anybody to commit to water filtration systems up on the ceiling level, I wasn't going to get there. But we've done a living wall on the outside. So we've kind of created a sort of living wall sort of fascia. So the brand element around is that fascia, and then we've got sort of planters that will grow over time. So they've started, they're sort of about that size at the moment, but I think in a few years they should be cascading down the building, and it should feel you know, sort of all the it's not ivy because we didn't want it to go mad, but it's that sort of hanging sort of planting that we're sort of doing. And then we had some plant pots as well with some sort of ground level. And I started to sort of get bit of an understanding, because there is this thing about being able to produce so having planting, about putting oxygen back into the air, which is another angle of sort of biophilia around that reoxygenization, and obviously great for the planet as well. So all of those different, so we experimented with all of it. I think the building is, it's just a year old now, so it's been up and running about a year, and we were back in, and there was a problem with the filtration system on the front. It was blocked, so we've had to redo a little bit of that. So that was a learning, more about the installation rather than the actual concept. But it does show you that idea of a digital app would be much better. We'd have noticed it sooner rather than me just having to walk past and go, that's looking a bit brown, that shouldn't be looking like that. And the plant pots as well, I think we wanted the branch colleagues to be able to water them, and it's clear they haven't watered them. So there's something about the operating model as well, when you're kind of, you're going to do planting into buildings. You've got to get that sort of, how are these plants going to be taken care of? Are you going to automate it? Are you going to get a facilities management company to come in and actually water those things? So I think it definitely gave us a lot of learnings and insight, which we're starting to then sort of think about how we build that in, as I'm thinking about office design, which is the sort of next space for me. It's given me a lot of learnings, but I definitely need an expert sort of working alongside me to kind of keep me sort of guided as far as that's concerned, really. But it's been amazing, and the colleagues loved working in there. They still love working in there, and it looks amazing. And customers really love it as well. We've had some, because there's a whole story. The whole space is kind of got a story around it in terms of what we've done. And we have had a couple of I think we had a member of Take That. I can't remember which one it was coming in, and they were talking about the whole story and things like that. So they feel very proud, the colleagues, in terms of being able to explain the space and what it's all about. But we got a lot of learnings from it, and we're starting to weave some of that sustainability aspect into the kind of scale rollout of our of our sort of spaces and our broader branch program. So it's been good.
Yeah,
a lot of learning.
Sounds fantastic. I mean, you touched on there about the sustainable aspect, like getting the recycled, and working with smaller companies as well, companies that are kind of innovating in that space. I mean, I love Biophilic Design for so many different reasons, and that's one of them. That whole kind of sort of sustainability aspect. Do you yourself? I mean, I kind of sort of know the answer, but maybe you can elaborate it on a little bit. But do you yourself think that biophilic design and sort of nature-inspired design is sort of one of it's quite key, really, for us trying to reach sort of the net zero targets, and kind of like trying to push also sustainable behaviour amongst the workforce or the people who are using the space as well? I mean, what do you feel about all that?
Yeah, totally. I think I think I was lucky enough to go on I think the bank was doing something with I think it was Cambridge, so did a little sort of mini course around sustainability, and I think some of the insight that they were giving, just looking back at how the planet has warmed up over the last sort of I think it's about 50 years. They have this sort of line where it's fairly blue, and then it gets oranger and redder and redder, and you just sort of look at it, and it's such a big, overwhelming problem, and it can feel quite overwhelming, I think, to a lot of people about well, what can I do? Can I obviously I can recycle at home, and I can do this, and what can I do? And I think if you start to think like that, it becomes too big. And so I think trying to think and we're doing this in the bank at the moment. We've set sustainability as one of our sort of values, sort of you've got to get everybody in the bank thinking about, so in your role, what can you do to further that sort of sustainability agenda. And I think that's a really powerful statement, actually, because I think that's where I started. So what can I do within my role to actually think about sustainability? So I've been championing driving out paper in branches. So we have a lot of paper. If you come in for certain sort of interviews, you can go out with a stack of, you know, brochures and quotes and, you know, illustrations and things like that. And, you know, being able to move more of that into sort of more of a digital sort of platform would obviously help with the sort of paper piece. So it's really sort of examining the role that you do and thinking about how you can become more sustainable. But I think biophilia and planting, I think it becomes a much more visible statement as well about how the bank is thinking about sustainability, you know. And I think putting planting back into the workplace and the environment, they're big spaces, and you know, I think there's just something about, as I say, the visible statement, but also that sort of reoxygenization and the feel good and being sort of back connected with nature. And also possibly, it's a hypothesis, but you know, possibly that visible statement of this is a bank that is committed to you know, a sustainability agenda, and it's not just thinking about, you know, the bigger sort of things that the bank can influence, but also the smaller things around how we can, you know, make people feel just a little bit better in the work environment. So so our new designs that will be coming will have a lot more sort of planting within them, and we're really thinking about how we do that. But lots of people all over the world have been doing a very, very good job about it. I see all sorts of you know, stunning sort of placement. I was looking at I think it was a sort of reception desk the other day, and it was, you know, square box, this grid framework, and it just had this amazing tree growing out of the back of it. And I thought, oh my goodness, that just, it looks so stunning. And to have a tree in a space, you know, when you go to restaurants and they have, you know, live trees within spaces, it just makes you feel so good. And yeah, I think there's just something joyful about actually, wow, this is an amazing space, and that sort of connection. So yeah, having the opportunity to do it in our office spaces, I think is just going to be a real privilege. I just want to make them timeless. I want them to just, you know, last and yeah, be there for sort of future generations, really, because planting can do that, right? It doesn't just stop, you know.
That's lovely. Well, we're nearly at the end. So is there anything else you'd like to add before I ask my magic question?
No, I don't think so. Just thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, actually, just chatting all things sort of design and planting. But yeah, thank you.
That's really nice. Well, so the question I ask everybody at the end of the podcast, and I think it's my favorite bit, this magic, if you could paint the world with a magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like?
So I'm thinking about office spaces now and cities. And if I had my way, I would have the top of every building having a garden, and a wild sort of nature garden with you know, beehives and pollination, and really something that is just, you know, if you were sort of drone up rather than looking down on buildings at the moment where there's this concrete jungle, it would actually be, you know, it would feel a very green space. You know, I think we're lucky in Britain that we have a lot of green space around. I live somewhere that is terribly green, and it's beautiful. But when I go to London or Manchester or whatever, there's such built up enclosed spaces. But actually, when you look top down, there are so many rooftops that could be gardens. You know, and I know it's challenging and planning permission and all the rest of it, but you gave me a magic wand, so I'm kind of going, right, forget all that. We just make it happen, and yeah, we just put nature back into the city spaces, and see if we can get the carbon or the carbon down, oxygen levels up, you know, by sort of doing that. I think it's a very simple thing that could be done. So I'd love to see that. Love to see more green cities. I think that would be my magic wish.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.